I'd spent 3 weeks getting ready for that interview, printing resumes, rehearsing in front of the mirror until my voice stopped shaking, even borrowing heels from a friend so I'd look the part. It wasn't glamorous, but it was full-time, steady, and came with health insurance, something I hadn't had since high school. After years of dead-end jobs to keep myself and my son afloat, I kept telling myself, this is it. This is where things change. That morning, I was up before the sun, hair in curlers, blouse pressed. My stomach churned with that dangerous mix of excitement and desperation you feel when failure isn't an option. I moved quietly, hoping to avoid my family's usual commentary about knowing my place. But they were already in the kitchen. Dad sat at the table with his coffee, scrolling his phone. Mason leaned on the counter in sweatpants, smirking. Mom didn't even glance up from her crossword. "Where you going all dressed up?" Dad's tone was sharp enough to cut skin. "Interview," I said, trying to sound light. "Administrative assistant, downtown. It's a good company." Mason snorted. "So, a secretary. Thought you wanted a real job." "It is a real job," I said, but my voice cracked just enough for Dad to hear it. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You think you're better than us just because you've got a nice blouse? Don't forget who keeps a roof over your head." I swallowed my reply. The truth was, I paid most of my paycheck toward bills every month. Mason paid nothing. I reached for my purse, but before I could make it out the door, Dad's hand clamped around my arm. "What's your rush?" His voice was calm, too calm. "I'll miss the bus," I said, trying to pull free. "Won't take long," he muttered. Then he shoved me into the coat closet. My shoulder slammed into the wall, my heel caught on a box, and I stumbled into the dark. The door slammed, the lock clicked. "Dad," I pounded on the wood, "let me out." Mason's voice came through, smug. "Don't worry, sis. I'll go in your place. Someone's gotta represent the family." "That's my interview." My voice cracked into panic. Laughter, low from Dad, sharp from Mason. "You don't deserve it," Dad said. "You'd just embarrass us." The air felt thin. Coats, boxes, dust. It was like the walls were pressing in. I pounded until my fists throbbed, but no one answered. Through the crack at the bottom, I heard footsteps, keys jingling, Mason's voice, "Wish me luck." The front door slammed. Silence. I don't know how long I stayed there, an hour, maybe 2. My phone was in my purse outside, no way to call for help. Eventually, I heard Mom walk past. I banged on the door, voice breaking. "Mom, please, I'm locked in here." Her voice was flat, almost bored. "Should have gotten up earlier, then you wouldn't have to rush." I was up. "They locked me in here." "Well, maybe you should have thought about how you talk to your father. Actions have consequences." Her footsteps faded like I wasn't even worth finishing the conversation. When the door finally opened, the hallway light stabbed at my eyes. Dad stood there, coffee in hand, looking like he'd just let the dog in from the yard. "Miss your bus?" he asked, smirking. My knees ached from sitting on the floor. I brushed past him without a word, went straight to my room, and grabbed my phone. One missed call, a voicemail from the company, polite, distant. They'd moved on to another candidate. I sat on the bed, staring at nothing. In the kitchen, Mom and Dad congratulated Mason for landing the job. I didn't cry, not yet. I just listened, picturing him behind the desk that should have been mine. But under the numbness, something sharp was taking shape. I didn't see Mason until late that night. He came home reeking of expensive cologne, bragging into his phone about how easy the interview had been, how the manager liked his confidence. Dad nodded along like Mason had just won an Olympic medal instead of stealing my shot at a stable life. The next morning, Mason waltzed into the kitchen in a brand new shirt. Mom served him bacon and eggs without even glancing at me. I poured the last of the coffee, burnt, bitter, and sat at the far end of the table. "So, when do you start?" Dad asked. "Monday," Mason said. "Pays decent, but it's all about the connections. Just a stepping stone. I'm not staying stuck as some admin drone." They laughed. I kept my eyes on my mug. fingers tightening around the handle until my knuckles ached. I'd swallowed moments like this for years, their cruelty always finding a seat at the table, eating better than I did. But this time, the humiliation didn't fade. It settled deep, burning hotter every time I saw Mason's smug face. By Monday, I had a plan. I didn't have their money or their connections, but I had something they'd always underestimated. I remembered everything, every slip of the tongue, every detail they thought I'd forget. And Mason, he was a threadbare sweater. One good pull, and the whole thing would come apart in my hands. That morning, I left before him. I knew exactly where he worked, my building. I'd memorized it back when the job was still supposed to be mine. The lobby smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, the glass doors polished so bright I could see my reflection staring back at me. I waited in the coffee shop across the street, nursing a drink I couldn't really afford. At 8:57, Mason strolled in, late energy drink in hand, yelling into his phone, shirt untucked, hair a mess, no bag, no notepad, no effort. That told me everything I needed to know. For the next few days, I shadowed him from a distance. He was laughably predictable, vanishing for smoke breaks even though he didn't smoke, spending lunches flirting with the barista, sneaking into alleys to joke with friends instead of working. Predictability is a weakness, and in the right hands, it's a weapon. By Friday, I knew my opening. That morning, I skipped the coffee shop and went straight inside. At the front desk, I smiled and said I was dropping something off for Mason Clark. The receptionist barely looked up before waving me through. His desk was exactly as I pictured it, chaotic piles of paper, half-drunk coffee, and a sticky note on the monitor with his password in all caps, his birth year plus the word king. It was almost insulting how easy he made it. I didn't touch a thing. Not yet. I just stood there, taking in the office I should have been sitting in. On the wall, framed in silver, were the company values: integrity, accountability, respect. I nearly laughed out loud. That weekend, Mason came home bragging. He'd been given a small client account because the manager says I'm a natural leader. Dad beamed like Mason had just been crowned prince of the city. No one noticed me slip away to my room, open my laptop, and create a new document titled Plan. When I was finished, Mason wouldn't just lose the job, he'd lose the little kingdom he'd built in his head. And my parents, they'd have front row seats to the collapse. By Monday, the house felt charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. Mason shuffled into the kitchen half asleep while I was already dressed, hair pulled back, backpack over my shoulder. "Where you going so early?" he mumbled through a mouthful of toast. "Nowhere important," I said, just smiling enough to irritate him. He shrugged, too busy scrolling to notice the flash drive I slipped into my pocket. I walked to the bus stop, but I wasn't going home. Over the weekend, I'd collected everything, every crude joke Mason had made about milking the clock, every trash comment about clients, every slip where he badmouthed co-workers. My phone's voice memo folder was full. And now, I was ready to pull the thread. The final touch, screenshots of his private group chats, where he called his manager an airhead in heels and bragged about faking spreadsheets. I wasn't dumping them online. That would have been quick, messy, and impersonal. No, these were going straight to the one person who could crush him completely, his manager. I timed it down to the minute. At 10:15, Mason left for one of his smoke breaks. I walked in like I belonged there, nodded at the receptionist, and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. Her office door was open. She was bent over a file. "Excuse me," I said quietly, "you should see this. It's about Mason Clark." Her head lifted, eyes sharpening. I set the flash drive on her desk, then slid my phone forward, screen glowing with a handful of choice screenshots. I didn't wait for questions. The way her expression shifted told me she'd go through every file before the hour was over. That night, Mason didn't come home loud. He came home hollow, shirt wrinkled, tie balled up in his pocket, eyes red. He walked past Dad's questions without a word. But I wasn't finished. The next morning, while my parents were grocery shopping, I left an envelope in the center of the kitchen table. Inside, neatly printed pages detailing every screw-up Mason had made at that job, each one dated, labeled, undeniable. On top, a short note in my handwriting. This is what your golden boy does with opportunities that weren't his. When they returned, I stayed in my room. I listened to their voices rise, then drop into a heavy silence. They didn't cool me down. By the end of the week, Mason was back on the couch in sweatpants, unemployed and sulking. Dad stopped cooking him bacon and eggs. Mom stopped asking about his bright future. They didn't even look at him the same way. One night, I passed him in the hallway. "You'll pay for this," he muttered. I stopped, turned, and met his eyes. "You already did," I said, then walked away, leaving him clutching nothing, just like me in that locked closet. The difference was, I'd found the door. He never would.